Hi everyone, my name is Sullivan-Wiley and I'm a postdoc at the Pardee Center at Boston University. I am an environmental social scientist and co-chair of both the Social Science and Partners in Knowledge Transfer working groups at the Ecological Forecasting Initiative. So I used the subtitle to this talk, Opportunities for Building Partnerships and Advancing Basic Science, to signal that while the two groups and their missions overlap, they represent distinct focal areas. So the social science group has a focus on advancing scientific theory and knowledge through the development of use-oriented scientific research. The partners group is focused more on developing partnerships among the different people and groups that are involved in all stages of the ecological forecasting process, including but not limited to scientific research. So we look at human dimensions throughout the iterative forecasting cycle described in the figure here from the 2018 PNAS paper, from hypothesis development through to model building and use and application and sort of iterative improvement. So the social science working group and members reflect multiple social science disciplines, behavioral science, economics, decision theory, some data science, geography, as well as others. And the crux of what we think about is how to initiate, discuss, and develop new ideas in the social sciences that both draw from and then inform emerging challenges in eco-forecasting. So ultimately, the goal of this science is to improve our understanding in order to improve the forecasting cycle end to end, sort of throughout the entire process. So while this diagram outlines the major components of the process, our lens is on the people involved in these components. So this diagram is from a blog series the members of the social science group are writing, and highlights some of these people. So the people in orange boxes in the center and the roles that they play throughout the forecasting process, which are in the blue boxes to the right and on the left. So scientists are one group of people, but we're also interested in asking questions about the role of resource managers, of policymakers, and other decision makers. And also beyond the design of forecasting inputs and outputs, we're also interested in the use of forecasts in collecting and providing data that facilitate forecasts, and how different forecasts might be funded, disseminated, and iteratively improved. I mentioned use-oriented science. So social science for ecological forecasting is designed to be use-oriented, which is to say that it exists at kind of the intersection of novel research that forwards theory and basic science in the social sciences, and that is relevant to current challenges facing society. And achieving research at this intersection often requires or is significantly improved by collaborative partnerships with people outside of academia, including many of the actors that were on that previous slide, for the sort of co-production of knowledge. And so these kinds of collaborations, so this can range from, it can be sort of full research collaborations from the conception of research questions through to the ways results are communicated and forecasts are iteratively improved. It can also be the involvement of partners directly in developing and testing decision support products, so sort of on the back end, or in working to understand stakeholder decision-making processes more generally to help to improve the use of forecasts in environmental decisions. So the social science group has explored some of these questions in a blog series that's available on the FE website. I'll give a brief overview of some of that work here, just to give sort of an idea of some of the work that we've been up to. So in an early post by Kathy Gerst, she focused on how partnerships between forecasters and forecast users improved how forecast outputs were visualized so that they were more intuitive to the decisions being made and relevant for a wider range of decisions. An upcoming post by Gure Hatipoglu deals with our understanding of the kinds of policies and what characteristics of forecasts provide conditions where forecasts actually get formalized into policy. So sort of from the policy side and the forecast side, what conditions are necessary and sufficient to make forecasts used officially sort of in policies and regulations. Another area that is the subject of an upcoming post by Mike Gerst is in the area of biases and heuristics. So these are the mental shortcuts and rules of thumb that allow all people to think and act kind of quickly and efficiently. And under normal life conditions, they generally serve us pretty well. They kind of allow us to function, but the same sort of biases and heuristics may become problematic in ways that they can affect our role as scientists in how we design and interpret forecasts and how we elicit expert inputs for forecast parameters. And they're also, or they can be important, and I'll give some examples in a second, but they can be important to consider also when thinking about not only ourselves, but also how other people may be interpreting and using our work. So this is a huge area of research. So I'll provide a couple of examples. So Mike's post will look at anchoring bias, among other things. And this bias refers to the phenomenon where people, when they're presented with a value and then asked to provide another value, will tend to not stray too far from that initial value, even if it's arbitrary or unrelated. So in this experiment by psychologists Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky, they had people spin a wheel to get a number between 1 and 100. And then they estimated those same people then estimated the percent of UN countries that are in Africa. Folks who spun a lower number guessed a lower percentage, and folks who spun a higher number guessed a higher percentage consistently. So even though the spun value, the value that people spun has absolutely nothing to do with UN membership, that initial value still had a strong sort of signal or anchoring effect for the given value. And for those of you who are interested, the actual percentage is 28%. And so as the initial value becomes, and so in that example, it was completely arbitrary and irrelevant, that initial value. But the more relevant and less arbitrary that initial value comes, the anchoring bias gets stronger. So for eco-forecasting, when we're specifying a range or a point value in a model or forecast, beginning with what we think might be a mean value, an average value is likely to constrain the subsequent range that we come up with too narrowly. So instead, we can combat the anchoring bias by first thinking of the extremes of possible values, sort of what the maximum and minima are likely to be, and then working inward from there towards a point estimate if one is required. This is also an important bias to be aware of if you're ever in a position to negotiate a salary or a price on something. Just keep it in mind. Real life. So the second example I'll give quickly is called the availability heuristic. And it basically means that when asked to estimate or predict the probability of a future event or condition, people most often base their prediction on what most easily comes to mind. So I'll base the likelihood of having a delay at my local airport on the last time I flew through there or the last time I had a plane delay there, not on a balanced assessment of all of my experiences or other people's experiences at that airport. Right, so this heuristic tells us that recent or memorable events are more likely than they really are. So this is important to remember when making your own estimates or predictions, but also a really important thing to keep in mind with the people, with respect to people who might be engaged with your work, especially if your work is related to issues that appear in public media, because media coverage can have a strong effect on how available or how memorable things are in people's minds. And this is just a cartoon about how this might be relevant in a work or employment evaluation context. So the last research theme I'll talk about today relates to the integration of people into your system. If you're working in a coupled human and natural system or a socio-environmental system, you can think of people as being entities that are affected by environmental and ecological conditions, but you can also think of them as entities that affect environmental and ecological systems through their choices and actions. And this means thinking about the conditions under which people are making those decisions, or it can mean that. And so one of these conditions that affects decision making and the subject of some of my research is on social norms. So social norms have to do with two sets of expectations we have about other people. First is what we believe about what other people are doing, which is, and that's sometimes not observable. So this can sometimes be kind of a guess. So one that is observable would be something like, how often do my neighbors mow their lawns? What do they do with their leaves in the autumn? So that's one set of expectations. Then I also need to think about what do I believe my neighbors want me to do with my lawn, how frequently they want me to mow, or what should I do with my leaves? And also, what do I think they'll do about it if I do the wrong thing? Are there consequences, for example? These are both of these things, sort of the what I think other people are doing and what I think they want me to do. Both of those expectations are involved in social norms. So the importance of social norms in environmental decisions was tested by a group called O-Power back in the early 2000s, where they started putting these these kind of social comparisons on energy bills, showing energy users how much energy they were using in comparison to their neighbors, complete with kind of smiley or frowny faces and percent differences to let you know how you're doing. This gave consumers information about that first set of expectations, what other people are doing and how you compare. Then, to get to the second expectation, they also added a set of like action steps to give people some information about the should piece of the norm, sort of what people, it gives them a signal about what people expect them to do. So now this isn't perfect because it doesn't include any information on consequences, but it was still successful enough and intervention and cheap enough for providers to do that it is now a widely implemented tool. And as an example, I think the image here was a screenshot of one of my own energy bills some time ago. So some of this, most of this work is ongoing. You know, these are fields of expertise for folks in the social science working group. But right now, something that both of those groups of social science and partners are really excited about are the opportunities posed by the upcoming Neon Forecasting Challenge. We will be conducting research alongside the challenge and as part of the challenge to improve our understanding of how forecasts are designed, used, refined, and to help make them better. So that process is designed to help make these things better. And so these questions highlight some of the ways that social sciences and partnerships can contribute to the forecasting challenge. So this first one is in developing forecasting skill assessment, so developing the scoring rules. How will these forecasts be evaluated? We can incorporate social science into that and feedback from partners. In evaluating or thinking of expert elicitation, so we like aggregating across models, using models as expert hypotheses and learning about expert elicitation that way. The idea of trans or coupled human and natural systems or socio-environmental systems, and how human drivers are or are not integrated into the eco forecast and what that might mean. And also in the development of decision support tools. How can we evaluate their quality and usability, and what can that teach us about how they should be designed in future. So one overarching point for all of this, so for real world forecasts, we must consider the endpoint decision when determining what to forecast and how to communicate it. And in order to be able to do this work, social scientists and other partners will really need to be involved from day one. That's kind of the pitch. So in the social science and partners groups, we want to connect to researchers working on human dimensions of ecological forecasting with partners outside of academia and in the natural sciences. So bringing all these people together. So to that end, we need to get people on board. We need to get people involved. And so the group and involved in these different groups and in sort of the ecological forecasting initiative in general. So to that end, please do check out the blog, which is linked here. And also on the websites, which are listed on the next page, you can look at sort of the terms of reference and the work plans for each of these groups to get an idea of sort of, really what we're up to day to day and see if you might want to be involved. And then to get more directly involved in any number of ways, you can follow this link to the FE website, and that should give you a lot of really good information on sort of the specific steps you have to take to get involved. And then finally, there's a survey live right now that is linked here, and the QR code will get you there. And it is meant, so it's through the partners group, and it is meant to get an idea of who these potential partners who could or should benefit from being part of a forecasting community, to get connected, to get involved, and to get an idea just sort of who these players are. So whether you collect ecological data or store it, if you model or forecast, whether you make decision tools or evaluate them or share them or publicize them or use them, we would love to hear from you. So you can follow the link or scan the QR code, and that'll get you there right away. So with that, thank you very much, and I hope to see you at one of our meetings.